Thank you, Madam Chair. Assistant Secretary Berger, I'm concerned about the priorities that the Navy has right now. With all due respect to the obsession on climate change, the Secretary had a disastrous hearing in front of the full committee yesterday. Disastrous. So he goes to the Bahamas and makes it that states to the world climate change is one of his top priorities, and it clearly seems to be. His climate action plan was released before his 30-year shipbuilding plan. Yesterday, I took him, and so did several other senators, to task for not even producing a plan to produce 31 amphib ships, which is required by law. He looked at the Armed Services Committee and said, essentially, he's not going to do it. That's not going to fly. Let him know that, by the way. It's not going to fly. The U.S. Congress told him the number of ships he has to maintain and produce. That's in our constitutional responsibilities right here in the Senate, and he was ignoring us, right? But he sure does a lot on climate change. It's a real unbelievable focus in the wrong area. The Chinese military is not worried about climate change. It is worried about shipbuilding, hypersonics, and conducting a successful military invasion of Taiwan. Russia is not worried about climate change. It's worried about pushing its aggression deeper into Ukraine, and yet we have a secretary who's releasing his climate action plan before he does anything on shipping. It's remarkable. It's outrageous. And the only one who is excited about it is Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Let me go into some of your climate change action plan. You're going to get to 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035, including 100% zero-emission light-duty vehicle acquisition by 2027. Is that including the Marine Corps? And is that remotely possible? I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but that's in your plan. Can you speak to that?
Senator Sullivan, climate change is a threat to our installations and the investments that we make.
You think it was smart to get the climate action plan out before the 30-year shipbuilding plan out for the U.S. Navy? Was that a good use of priorities?
One of the primary responses that amphibious ships provide are to humanitarian assistance and disaster relief.
No, you didn't answer my question. Answer my question, respectfully. Did it make sense from the priority of the U.S. Navy to get your climate action plan out before you got your 30-year shipbuilding plan out? Is that a good prioritization of what the Navy stands for in our national defense?
Ranking Member Sullivan, my responsibilities center on this portfolio, which does not include shipbuilding, and so I'd leave that to the Secretary's response.
Okay, that's an okay response.
But where I do focus on the mission readiness of our sailors and Marines, and so I do think that climate change is a threat that we need to be ready for. That includes threats to our energy infrastructure, as you noted.
Okay, what about my question on 2027 for vehicles in the Marine Corps? Is that remotely doable?
We are on a track to make sure that we are acquiring vehicles, and the reason that we are doing that is to be untethered from logistics tails. You noted Russia. Russia uses energy as both a tool and a weapon.
But is that remotely doable 4 years from now?
We are on a track, and we are working along with our sister services to make sure that we are acquiring electric vehicles that are able to support all of our mission sets. And so through partnership, yes, sir, I think that we are on a track.
Another thing in your climate plan is to have the entire Navy achieve net zero emissions by 2050. What's the statutory basis of that goal?
We have set a goal. I don't think there needs to be a statutory basis.
There is none, by the way, just for everybody's. There's no statutory basis in any law to achieve net zero by 2050. Let me turn to you, Mr. Assistant Secretary Chaudhry. We have a significant buildup of the Air Force and the Army in Alaska. 100 fifth-gen fighters at Eielson and JBER, the new, and this is for Assistant Secretary Jacobson as well, the new 11th Airborne Division throughout the state. It gets very cold in Alaska. we're going to need significant supplies of energy. Can you commit to me and this committee to work with me on different opportunities for energy to power these bases, including natural gas, including our abundance of oil that can turn into jet fuel, which we need very significantly with regard to the energy needs in Alaska?
Ranking Member Sullivan, I can commit to you to do that. I think we need to work together to come up with a diverse set of options to make sure we're meeting our operational needs in the Pacific. The strategic importance of JBER is it goes without saying. It is that critical. So having a diverse capability of energy supplies is going to be critical. More broadly, I think redundancy is going to be key as well, because as we understand what the challenges are in this region, there are a number of logistic areas that we need to address. So absolutely, and I know we've committed to working on more innovative solutions than what you just described, including microgrids and opportunities at Eielson for nuclear and things like that of that sort. So yes, I commit to you.
I raised that in an EPW committee hearing today with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, all the commissioners, on what's happening at Eielson. I think it's exciting. Assistant Secretary Jacobson, do you have a view on that as well? Army's expanding in Alaska. 11th Airborne's doing great work, fantastic work, but we're going to need energy. It gets very cold. You know, Eielson gets 40, 50 below zero in the winter.
Ranking Member Sullivan, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for all of your support, and we're making significant investments in Alaska. Notably, to your point, we right now have a draft EIS to replace our coal-fired power plant at Wainwright with a gas plant, and I've expressed enormous interest in exploring nuclear energy in Alaska, and we're going to be watching very carefully what's happening at Eielson, because I believe it's a good option for us in Alaska and elsewhere. I want to look at small micronuclear reactors to power bases wherever it makes sense, particularly in remote locations where the energy challenges are as they are. I will be visiting Alaska in about 2 weeks.
Oh, good.
And I hope some of your staff or maybe you will be there and we can say hello.
We will coordinate. Good.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you're coming up. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Assistant
Sullivan, would you
Secretary Chowdhury, I want to follow up on Senator Shaheen's point and then make another point. What was the phrase again you used? Not 1 ounce of thrust, or what? And unpack that a little bit for me, because I think I agreed wholeheartedly with you, but I don't exactly understand what you were saying. What did you say again?
Senator Sullivan, we've got priorities that we need to meet, national security priorities. When it comes to operational energy, our goal is to reduce demand, to increase agility, to be more agile in the theater. If we can build that agility through drag reduction, through innovations in advanced coatings of engine design, through really leading edge innovations like blended wing body that increase our range, we meet the pacing threat. That's my goal. That's my number one priority. Now, if we get benefits from it as the largest largest user of fossil fuels, that's fantastic. That's great for the climate. We want to support that. But I'm clear-eyed on what my priorities are. And to me, if I'm given the choice between clearing the trees as an aircraft is taking off and the climate, I'm going to take clearing the trees, because I know what the crews are going through every single day. So I'm going to support them in that endeavor and make sure that as we go through, there's a lot of puts and takes in this, but we've got to make sure that we've got those priorities set appropriately. But demand reduction is going to be very, very helpful to us with logistics challenges, and we're trying to stretch every mission capability we can in order to improve that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Assistant Secretary Berger, related to that, I just want you guys to be clear, right? Where you're talking about these very aggressive zero-emission light duty, that means electric vehicles for Marines. Are you familiar with the Chosin Reservoir battle in the Korean War? Okay. So it got down to like 30 below zero. Okay, I want to make sure that you guys think through all of these kind of battles. 1st Marine Division surrounded by 120,000 communist Chinese, 30 below zero. Marines did remarkably well, okay? What I want to make sure is we're not doing some kind of innovation that sounds good in your 2030 climate strategy that ends up hurting the force, that ends up having Marines fighting maybe the North Koreans in 30 below zero and their vehicles don't work because they're EVs and nobody thought about it. Can you make sure you commit that to me? 2027 is right around the corner. And I got really nervous when you get some of the climate zealots who care more about climate action, like the Secretary of the Navy, than war fighting and keeping Marines and sailors and airmen safe, lethal, and ready to win wars. That's what you guys are all about, winning wars. Not net zero 2050 emissions. Has nothing to do with winning wars. So could you make that commitment to me?
Senator Sullivan, absolutely, mission comes first, and I'll share with
Mission, not emissions, right? Mission?
Yes, Ranking Member, mission comes first. But I'll share with you just a quick story because the Marines are actually leading in this in quite an impressive way because, as you noted, it's critically important to make sure that they are always going to win. I went out to General Motors with the Commandant just at the end of last year, and this is the conversation that we had with clarity, with focus. That was every question that we had. And we've continued that conversation with industry leaders who are thinking about this, that understand what it means to be forward deployed, competing, and that this is where we gain that advantage.
And lethal, right?
Yes, sir.
That's your mission, lethality.
Yes, sir.
Lethality, that's every one of your missions, correct?
And I'll borrow a phrase that that my colleague here uses, but it applies no matter where we are when we're talking about operational energy, and it's lethality per gallon. And so no matter where we are, how are we getting the most out of every gallon that we're using of whatever it is? And then as we look at other options, it is mission assurance and that lethality as well per megawatt hour, per any way that you are measuring energy, because we want to create that unfair advantage anytime a Marine, anytime a sailor, and I'm confident speaking for my colleagues here for their services, encounters an enemy. It is our job to think about every way to create that competitive advantage, make it unfair so that we are winning every time.
Okay. Assistant Secretary Chowdhury and Assistant Secretary Jacobson, I have I just want a commitment from both of you. You know, we've had this buildup of the Army and particularly the Air Force, particularly in interior Alaska with the 2 squadrons of F-35s. We've had some housing challenges that I know I've spoken to you about, and those are important. There's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say blame, but there's a lot of, we weren't fully ready in interior Alaska to fully house the new airmen coming with those 2 squadrons and their families, very importantly. The Air Force and the Army both have certain statutory authorities that they can use with regard to housing. We're still dealing with this. We're still struggling with it a little bit, particularly in interior Alaska. We want to make sure the airmen coming up to Eielson are able to bring their families. That's really, really important to have a good experience. So can I get your commitment to work with me in this committee on using your existing authorities that you have on helping us work through some of the housing challenges, both of you? It's more of the Air Force issue in interior Alaska, but it's a bit of a Army issue at J-Bear and in interior Fort Wainwright as well. Can I get both your commitments to work on base and off base? You have authorities. We need to get on this. We don't want, the Air Force, as you know, is contemplating 1-year unaccompanied tours for the F-35 contingent, and I think we can all agree that would be a disaster. We don't want that, and they don't want that. It's just the challenge of the housing. Can I get your commitment on that?
Senator Sullivan, I've been to Eielson a long time ago as a cadet. I know what it's like there. It is in interior Alaska, one of the most beautiful places on earth, but it's a great place to have a family. And you have my commitment to make sure that we work through this together to come up with the right solution. And to me, I err towards accompanied because it's something that I've lived through. Being accompanied with your family is it impacts the mission every single day, and executing that mission is dependent and a lot of times great that you can come home and spend time with your family rather than being far away, which can wear on the mission. So you have my commitment to work through that and use our existing authorities.
Great. Assistant Secretary.
Yeah, Senator Sullivan, as I say, I'll be there in the next couple of weeks, and I will make sure I get a full assessment of the housing needs. Also, the barracks needs. We are investing in FY24 in barracks, but that
great.
too, and many other investments in Alaska infrastructure, but I will specifically ask about family housing.
Madam Chair, do I have time for one more question?
I'm going to ask one more question, so you go ahead. You ask one
This is my final one, and it's related to the, so in the Army, as you know, in Alaska, we've had this really horrendous surge in service member suicides. And it's just heartbreaking, and it's still continuing. You know, I think the leadership from Secretary Austin, you know, General McConville, the leadership in Alaska are very focused on it. These are, I think, in some ways generational challenges with this generation of men and women serving way beyond our military's capability, but there's still a lot we can do. I think the Army is doing a lot on quality of life issues at places like Eielson that can be very remote and dark in the winter and stuff. So can you just touch on both, again, the Army in terms of Assistant Secretary Jacobson and Assistant Secretary Chowdhury, what you're doing on some of the installation elements of building out morale welfare centers, child care centers, and are you coordinating all with mental health providers on what those kind of facilities can do to address what's actually a real severe crisis in the Army in Alaska right now with regard to suicide?
Senator Sullivan, the suicide is really such a major concern for Army senior leadership, as you know, across the board, and particularly in Alaska, because of some of the isolated conditions and otherwise. And we recognize fully the connection between quality of life and morale.
Yeah.
And we are very focused on that particular issue in, as you say, these quality of life facilities, fitness centers, recreation centers, child development centers, to make sure that they accommodate not just the physical need, but the emotional, spiritual, and mental needs of soldiers and families.
Good, thank you. Assistant Secretary Chowdhury, do you have anything to add to that?
Senator Sullivan, all I can say is this is personal to me. I've lost wingmen over this issue, and so I take it very, very seriously. In fact, there's one of my classmates from the academy who works in the petroleum industry north of Eielson. And so he tells me a little bit about what it's like up there. So making sure we have those facilities taken care of. If I could, I'd like to make sure I stay focused on this issue by taking this back and working with my Manpower and Reserve Affairs counterpart to make sure we address Eielson specifically. Because having visited there a long time ago as a cadet, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I want to address it.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.